Hey guys, Synthetic Man here. It's been a while since I've talked about Resident Evil. As I've said in the past in the most monotone voice imaginable, I'm a massive fan of Resident Evil. So let's take a look at what's widely regarded by hardcore fans as the greatest game in the franchise, the remake of Resident Evil 1. I'm not going to be a contrarian by any stretch of the imagination here. This game is amazing, and without a doubt the best game in the classic survival horror style, and arguably the greatest survival horror game of all time, beaten out only by Silent Hill 2 in my heart. So it's a shame that it's also one of the last REs in that style, with the worst one, Resident Evil 0, coming out later the same year. This game is so beloved that people are still working on fan projects like the Unreal Engine 4 remake 18 years later, and countless YouTubers have talked about this game. If somehow you've never played a classic Resident Evil game, or tried one for an hour and wasn't impressed, I'll try to do this game justice and explain the appeal of fixed camera angles and tank controls. But before I start the video, I just want to remind you guys, I make reviews, I make rants, I make plenty of stuff on this channel. I've made a video about once a week for the past few months, and a lot of unique visitors to my channel don't know that I make other content, and you just move on to the next thing. Well, just take a second to check out the other stuff I have to offer. Well, if you end up liking this video, give me a like, subscribe, you can always unsubscribe later, yada yada yada, you know the drill. Love you all, on to the review. Being a self-proclaimed gaming purist with
Goopy Goblin Gamer Brain. Goopy Goblin Gamer Brain basically means that you have little to no patience for anything that isn't fun or engaging second-to-second gameplay.
Normally I would talk about game mechanics first, but this is survival horror. Emphasis on horror. Maintaining that atmosphere was clearly the most important aspect of this remake, as I would describe it, and I don't use this term lightly, as a visual masterpiece. If you know anything about this game, you know the reason that it is held up so incredibly well visually is because it uses pre-rendered backgrounds. Normally you would think this would be a horrible idea, but Capcom pulled it off beyond anyone's expectations. Even upscaled in 1080p, the environment blends surprisingly well, despite being 2D images. This is helped quite a lot by the fixed camera angles, which really sells that illusion. But of course, graphic fidelity is nothing without a unique setting to match, and as many have said before me, the Spencer Mansion is practically a character in and of itself. This isn't just a spooky mansion, this is the spooky mansion. Even though I personally am not scared of this game, just take a look at some of these areas, man. The atmosphere in this game is top tier. Obviously, the amazing ambient soundtrack adds an extra layer of fear, with nearly every room in the game having a unique track. A good soundtrack in a horror game is extremely important to me, as for some reason that I can't really explain, music often scares me more than the game itself. Amnesia: The Dark Descent was a great example of this.
I don't know what I'm doing! Ah! Shit! Fuck me!
We take it for granted these days, especially since this franchise is over 20 years old, but the monsters in Resident Evil are a massive part of why these games are so successful. Imagine if the main enemies in these games were just different types of zombies, like Left 4 Dead or Dead Rising or Killing Floor. It wouldn't be the same. No, in Resident Evil, zombies are just the basic bitch fodder enemies. Yet, they're also surprisingly tanky, taking up to 8 handgun rounds to take down. But Resident Evil is known for the BOWs, bioorganic weapons, just as much as the zombies. Yawn, Plant 42, Black Tiger, Hunters, Chimera, and of course, the Tyrant. These monsters laid the groundwork for what Resident Evil is today. The remake even managed to make zombies fresh again with the infamous Crimson Heads. For the one guy in the audience who doesn't know, if you kill a zombie in this game without blowing its head off, after a certain amount of time it will get back up, its skin now tinted red with claws on its fingertips, and it will run, yes, run, after you.
Oh Lord, he coming!
This mechanic is just awesome. It leaves the choice up to you, the player. Do you try to skip the zombies? Do you grab the lighter and oil canteen to burn their bodies? Do you kill them anyway, hoping you don't have to travel through that hallway again? It's a fun idea that I wish was brought back at some point in the series. One way the remake cranks up the horror significantly compared to the original is the addition of Lisa Trevor. Normally monsters in RE are exactly that. Mindless, bloodthirsty creatures to kill with no remorse. But the story of Lisa Trevor is different. She was a little girl who was experimented on by Umbrella in the 60s, the progenitor virus mutating her and keeping her alive over the next 3 decades, eventually developing the G virus inside of her body. Throughout this time she yearns for her mother, searching the mansion for her after the outbreak started. Every time she comes across a woman, she tears off her face and sews it to her body, thinking that it's her mother's. Despite that 30 years have passed, she still has the mind of a child, albeit a homicidal one. Resident Evil never has lore this in-depth or enemies this sympathetic. She really stands out as an awesome addition to the franchise and has that sort of nemesis tier of immortality threat, though you only encounter her 3 times in the game. Now, the one thing about this game that hurts the horror aspect, and I mean really just kills a lot of the tension, is the story and characters. If you know anything about the dialogue in the original game, you know why it's so goofy in the remake.
Jill, here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
Oh, I almost forgot. It's a lockpick. You'd make better use of it.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
That was a close one. A second late, you would have fit nicely into a sandwich.
Really?
Believe it or not, I wouldn't change it one bit. I've always liked that Resident Evil had a campy side, which one of my complaints with Resident Evil 7 was that it was too serious. The dynamic between Jill and Barry wouldn't be nearly as endearing if they reacted realistically to a zombie-filled mansion.
Hey, hold on a sec. Look what I've found.
What?
A can of fizz. It's sure to yellow and mellow those things.
Excuse me, the fuck did you just say?
Barry is an absolute Chad in this game and saves your ass multiple times. Jill is surprisingly chill, considering she's trapped in a zombie-infested mansion. Chris is his stoic self, and Rebecca is basically just a walking first aid kit. Wesker is comically evil even without his superpowers, from later in the series.
The ultimate life form. Tyrant.
Wesker, you've become senile.
Chris, you'll never understand. It's magnificent.
All of these elements combine to create that classic Japanese game feel that is all but lost in the current console generation. This is where I'm gonna lose people. For some reason, a lot of you don't want to give classic survival horror a chance. Listen, I get it. Really. Most people want to play a game with fast-paced shooting and movement abilities, and tank controls have a terrible reputation. Seriously guys, just give it a chance. This game has easily the best implementation of survival horror mechanics in this franchise. So, how to explain the appeal? Well, the tank controls and fixed camera angles are purposely designed to cripple your movement and awareness, which increases the fear factor because often you can hear an enemy in the same room, but you can't actually see them from the camera angle that you enter the room with. And even if you know the room layout, as you progress through the game, enemies can break in from other rooms, zombies can resurrect as Crimson Heads, and later in the game, hunters replace a bunch of the zombies. So even clearing a room is no guarantee of safety when you have to backtrack later. Obviously, a big part of survival horror is the survival mechanics. Resources are scarce, especially in the early game. The choice of whether or not to kill zombies or just run through rooms is a real quandary on your first run through the mansion because you can very easily run out of handgun ammo, and if you're playing as Chris, you're probably shit out of luck as you've neither got the backup weapons nor even the inventory space to hold them. So, what incentives exist to juke the zombies? Defensive items. When grappled by a zombie, if you have a knife, stun gun, or flash grenade, you can give them a face full of whatever you've got. Best part is that they don't take up inventory space. Herbs are also surprisingly generous on normal difficulty, the trade-off being that they're often in dead-end rooms. So don't be afraid of a possible dead game scenario. There's plenty of resources as long as you're willing to backtrack. Then of course we have the other major element of Resident Evil gameplay, puzzles. The puzzles are pretty basic, no point and click adventure game vagueness and no real complexity, but they have a certain charm to them. Partially because they offer a break from the horror aspect, but also I admire the sheer variety in the type of puzzles offered. They could be as simple as swiping a bronze shield for a gold one, or more memory intensive like the candle billiards puzzle. The latter can be pretty frustrating if you have terrible memory like me. You have to light each candle in the room, remembering both the color and symbol beneath it. The color corresponds to a pool ball, and the symbol underneath to a keypad lock. So while on paper it sounds pretty simple, remembering that the cat's eye is green and the green pool ball is 6, and also remember the other two, can be pretty difficult. Also, something as simple as putting a few puzzle pieces together to open a chest can be frustrating or fun depending on the player. On top of these, there's standard block pushing puzzles, a color match puzzle, and many more small brain teasers. It's a shame that each entry in the series had fewer and fewer puzzles, because they tied in well with the item management mechanics. Something I really applaud this game for is its flexible difficulty settings. See, this game can truly be challenging for any skill level, from Little Nephew easy to speedrunner hard. Okay, not really, but you'll see what I mean in a second. Basically, there's multiple types of difficulty options. First, you got bog standard difficulty settings, normal, easy, and game journalist at the start. After you beat the game, you unlock hard. These are pretty self-explanatory. They affect enemy placement, damage, and the amount of health and ammo you find. The second difficulty setting is the character that you choose to play as. I actually think this was sort of bad game design for newcomers. Not once does the game explain that playing as Chris is hard mode, and in the original game I'm not even sure it was intentional, possibly just bad balancing. But Jill is definitely both easier and more fun to play as. To sum up the differences, Jill has 8 item slots, Barry, who lets you grab the shotgun for free and can kill a boss for you, arguably the hardest boss in the game, can grab the assault shotgun early, has the lockpick, skipping the annoying small key item, gets a grenade launcher, the second best weapon in the game, pretty early on, whereas Chris has 6 item slots and has to grab small keys to open 4 doors in the game. No Barry, but Rebecca can heal you a couple times. Has a permanent lighter, which doesn't really help much. can run slightly faster and has a lot more health, and can shoot weapons slightly faster and has a higher headshot % chance. If you haven't played the game before, Chris doesn't sound so bad, but trust me, he is absolutely painful to play as in the early game. Having 2 less inventory slots, plus having to find and grab small keys on top of every other puzzle item in the game, is a recipe for constant backtracking to item rooms. If you've memorized item locations and know which rooms are optional, it's not so bad, but he's a terrible character for first-time players. Jill obviously has none of these issues, and the grenade launcher is a pretty fun weapon. Standard rounds are kinda weak, about the same as a shotgun shell without the head exploding power, but flame and acid rounds can shred bosses with ease. So yeah, just play as Jill. There's also bonus modes and a sort of punishment for New Game Plus. If you select once more, after beating the game as Chris and Jill, Zombie Forest has a chance to spawn in any room. The catch is, he runs as fast as a Crimson Head, and if you shoot him, his grenade vest blows up and kills you instantly. Kind of fun, kind of annoying if you're chasing achievements. The bonus modes are Real Survival and Invisible Enemy Mode. Real Survival is the hardest difficulty available. Enemy scaling and item availability is set to hard, auto aim is disabled, and item boxes are no longer magical, meaning if you place an item in a box, it's only in that box. This mode is actually a really cool challenge that tests your knowledge of the game world. You also can't cheat with the infinite weapons because they're not in this mode. Invisible Enemy Mode, on the other hand, is kinda shit. It's just the standard game with auto aim disabled and all of the enemies are invisible. It's not really that hard actually, because you can set the difficulty to whatever you want. It's just stupid and pointless outside of one achievement. The last thing that further increases this game's replayability is the aforementioned infinite weapons. This feature is pretty standard in the Resident Evil games. Beat the game under certain conditions, like total time, number of saves, and whether or not you used first aid sprays. In this game, however, the only score that matters is time. Beat it under 5 hours to get the custom Samurai Edge handgun, and beat it in under 3 to get the infinite rocket launcher. Obviously you don't need these weapons for anything, unlike the Resident Evil 3 remake where the unlocks were practically mandatory to beat the highest 2 difficulties. No, for this it's just fun to blow stuff up for a bit. There's also a couple unlockable costumes for beating the game twice with each character, and in the current gen remaster you can play as RE5 Chris or Jill from the start. Most cutscenes are in-engine too, so they actually wear the costumes in them. So yeah, this game's awesome, just play it. Truly one of the greatest horror games of all time. Without a doubt the greatest remake of all time, as Capcom went above and beyond the expectations of one by adding large new sections of the mansion, Crimson Heads, Lisa Trevor, and bonus modes. This game is the quintessential classic Resident Evil game. Resident Evil 2 and 3 are also great games, but this one understood the formula the best. Not too many enemies, an actual reason to ignore said enemies, high replayability, and the most memorable location in the franchise. It's not my favorite Resident Evil game, 4 still holds that crown, but it's a very solid second place. It's a shame that RE never found a proper balance between action and horror. They've come close a couple times. Revelations would have been perfect if the ship segments were longer and the other playable characters were cut completely. The Resident Evil 2 remake was also really close to what I wanted, but there was a bit too much fluff and it needed some kind of progression system like 4 or 5. To this day, Dead Space 1 and 2 are the closest to my dream Resident Evil game. Let's hope Capcom doesn't fuck up the Resident Evil 4 remake unlike 3. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment. I already said it earlier in the video. Next video I'll be tackling Amnesia Rebirth, a true sequel to The Dark Descent. I'm hoping it's good because I wasn't the biggest fan of Soma. Before I go, I do want to tell you guys, especially those of you who've been watching my content for a while, I'm going to start a Patreon soon. Yes, I know, especially since I just insulted Jim Sterling's Patreon, but that's more, you know, because of his political opinions than the actual concept of Patreon. You know, I don't have a problem with Patreon, but the thing is, you know, I want to be frank with you guys because, one, I don't want to milk anybody dry because I don't need the money to survive or to keep the channel going, right? This is, for now, this is just for the channel. This is all to support the channel. Like, I just bought a new microphone that unfortunately is not coming until December. But essentially, the funds are going to go into, one, you know, recuperating that loss of cash. Probably buying a webcam. I'm going to do a face reveal at some point. Don't worry, I'm not afraid of doxing or anything. Buying games, which I do want to offer an alternative. I might as well tell you guys now. If you don't want to, you know, pay me monthly, I will give you my Steam right here. And, you know, if you want to just gift me games instead of, you know, paying me monthly, basically I'm going to start a list of games based on all the things people have requested me. I'm going to go back through comments, start a Google Docs, and starting January of next year, I'm going to tackle at least one fan-requested game a month for a review. So, as for incentives in the Patreon, I haven't really thought of anything. I mean, I can very easily put all supporters in the credits, so that's an easy one. But other than that, I don't know. I don't really want to offer exclusive content to incentivize people to throw money at me. And I really, especially, you know, in this pandemic, I don't want anybody to, you know, give me money they can't afford to give me. You know, I'm not in any crisis right now. I'm not about to, like, throw all my prospects away to live off of YouTube with only 2,500 subscribers. I mean, really? No. This is literally just so that I can try and review more games. I mean, that's essentially the only goal of this. Because more money means I can buy more games, and you guys, I will take your requests seriously starting next year. That's a promise from me. So, yeah, just want to warn you guys now. See you next time.